Pope Francis' death was mysterious, but he made a significant pronouncement before his death that startled Catholics and the world. What and why did he say? Is this about the next pope? Will the Church follow trends? Come learn about Pope Francis's life and his remarkable announcement. Pope's lowly beginning. Buenos Aires native Jorge Mario Bergoglio was an ordinary boy before becoming Pope Francis. His parents were Italian immigrants who had him on December 17, 1936. Jorge enjoyed a simple existence with tango music, home-cooked meals, and city streets. Since he was the oldest of 5 children, Jorge felt a subtle sense of responsibility even as a little lad. Jorge didn't always want to be a priest. He studied chemistry and was a factory custodian. His life changed at 21 when he felt drawn to the priesthood. He knew God was calling him to serve more fully. Therefore, he did so wholeheartedly. He immediately joined the Jesuits, who value education, humility, and service. He taught, principled, and led all Argentine Jesuits. Jorge's journey wasn't always easy. He was accused of failing to defend kidnapped priests during Argentina's 1970 military dictatorship. He faced charges for years. Many others later stated that he saved lives behind the scenes without public recognition. Jorge was stung by the accusation, but he stayed true to his religion and lived simply, cooked his meals, and took public transport instead of being chauffeured like most bishops. History updated on March 13, 2013. After Pope Benedict XVI resigned for the first time in 600 years, the world watched to see who would succeed him. The cardinals elected Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the first American pope, Jesuit pope, and Francis pope, to everyone's shock. Inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi, who loved the poor and was humble, he selected that name. Pope Francis was distinct from the start, insisted on not living in papal luxury. He chose a small Vatican guest house, wearing basic white robes instead of Pope's red shoes, and began speaking about daily matters. He addressed humanity's problems like poverty, climate change, migration, and mercy. He stated the Church should be like a field hospital, serving those in need without judging or rejecting them. One of his most remarkable moments occurred weeks after becoming pope. He bathed the feet of juvenile convicts, women, and Muslims at a youth prison on Holy Thursday, instead of 12 priests, as custom required. That one act conveyed that this pope was for the people, someone who would violate tradition to offer love and compassion. Pope Francis is famous for his short but forceful words. When asked about gay priests in the Church, he famously answered, "Who am I to judge?" He often reminded the world that the underprivileged cannot wait. He visited slums in Africa, conflict zones in the Middle East, and distant Asian islands, places few popes had visited. Throughout his travels, he met prisoners, refugees, the sick, and the forgotten. However, his pontificate was controversial. People must speak. His progressive, open, and political views were sometimes criticized by traditional Catholics. Some bishops and cardinals publicly clashed with him on divorce, same-gender relationships, and women in the Church. Pope was calm throughout. He wasn't even targeting popularity. He was striving to emulate Jesus in today's world. Pope Francis also confronted authority honestly. He wrote an encyclical on caring for the globe to urge world leaders to act on global warming. He advocated for justice, mercy, and peace in the U.S. Congress, UN, and European Parliament. Pope Francis left an indelible impact on the Catholic Church and the world by 85. Despite his advancing age, he kept going. He preached and advocated for the poor and disadvantaged while traveling. His life revolved around that. He was worried about his health behind the scenes. Young Pope Francis lost part of a lung. Over time, he developed knee and other age-related difficulties. He used a wheelchair for public engagements and was hospitalized for breathing troubles. Despite this, he always returned smiling. He told reporters he was alive. He wanted nobody to worry about him. He felt he had a lot of work to do as long as he could speak, write, or pray. He was right. Pope Francis prepared for a life-changing event while the world fretted about his health. Vatican murmurs grew in the weeks before his death. The Pope spoke with foreign leaders, wrote to war victims, and even invited former enemies to private meetings. No one knew what was happening, but everyone knew something big was about to happen. The closing days and increasing mystery. As Pope Francis neared his late 80s, his closest friends observed a change in him, and not simply his movement. He slowed down and used a wheelchair. Mercy must no longer be a catchphrase. It must be policy, he said. He also launched the Pope Francis Fund for the Forgotten, a large Vatican-backed program for war-torn refugee children, poor communities globally. He stated it would be the Church's greatest love gesture today. Know that God's heart is limitless. The Church must move forward not by fear or tradition, but by Jesus' example, who crossed all boundaries. Francis then called for a global repentance and reconciliation day. It welcomed all faiths, not just Catholics. He concluded by urging the Church to accept divorce and commanding you. It is a cry to humanity, the Church, and every heart that still listens and is ready for God's whisper. This video was released in over 50 languages. Within hours, it spread worldwide. Buzz on social media. News outlets aired specials. Everyone, believers and non-believers, was moved. While some admired it, others criticized it and stated numerous lies about it. No one ignored it. A few hours later, the world learnt that Pope Francis had died peacefully on Easter Monday morning, surrounded by a small group of friends, aides, and medical staff. He waited till his last breath to say what needed to be spoken. He had the message out first. After completing his mission, he gently died. However, the story continues. His death accentuated his message. Worldwide, many wondered what next. How do we handle this final impassioned plea from someone who spent his life fighting the strong, standing with the poor, and teaching us that faith is love in action? The world would grapple with those questions in the coming days, weeks, and months, and the man's legacy beyond a message. He left a movement the world will admire. Divided but emotional Catholic Church. Pope Francis' farewell message had scarcely settled when news of his death emerged and the stillness began. A deep hush that felt like the world paused. He led the world's 1,003,000,000 Catholics for over a decade. Pope Francis's death shook more than religion. Politics, activism, social movements, and even everyday life were shaken by it. St. Peter's Square in Rome was filled with thousands of people within hours after the announcement. Some had candles, others flowers. Eyes closed, several knelt on the cobblestone plaza, whispering prayers or crying. A banner across the square read, "He died with love in his hands." The Catholic Church's members had complex emotions. Several progressive Catholics were hopeful. They considered Pope Francis's final announcement a revolutionary appeal to advance the Church. They applauded his break with tradition, his embracing of the poor, his opposition to greed, and his softening of the Church's stance on excluded groups for years. Priests and laity staged vigils in all parishes from Argentina to Australia. Some read Francis's farewell remarks at Mass. Others formed prayer groups to continue his dream. Many wondered if the next pope would continue or undo this legacy. Not everyone liked Pope Francis's farewell address. Some church traditionalists felt misled or bewildered. They thought Pope Francis had gone too far by proposing doctrine-bending measures. We grieve a prominent Eastern European cardinal who spoke on national television, but we cannot blindly follow a message that could change the Church too rapidly. Even his opponents couldn't dispute his significance. One bishop said, "He made us talk and listen." He was unavoidable whether you liked him or not. Pope Francis was known for embracing other faiths. These communities now pay tribute. The Jewish rabbis of Jerusalem lit candles for the Pope at the Western Wall. In Istanbul, Muslim authorities organized special prayers at mosques for him. Thai Buddhists and Japanese Shinto priests include Francis in their rites. Multiple world religion leaders delivered a startling statement. Pope Francis died, not only Catholic. Humanity lost a friend and a model of love. It was historic and polite. Never had multi-faith mourning and solidarity for a pope been so great. His message briefly bridged decades of division. From presidents to prime ministers, political leaders reacted quickly. Former U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris claimed Pope Francis was a global conscience and a man of faith in a public address. Future generations will hear his final words. France, Germany, Brazil, South Korea, and others lowered flags to half-staff across the Atlantic. It moved some leaders. The Prime Minister of Canada declared a day of reflection on immigration and charity, noting Pope Francis's refugee support. After recalling the Pope's repeated calls for prisoner mercy, Colombian officials agreed to review their jail reform measures. Some were more wary. In all nations where the Pope's views on same-gender partnerships or women's leadership were controversial, reactions were more muted.